Ever feel like life's kind of like a cosmic joke? Like even if you like won the lottery
Yeah.
and you traded your like morning commute for a private jet,
Yeah.
there'd still be like something to stress about.
Yeah. It's that like persistent itch of dissatisfaction.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it?
Totally.
The feeling that no matter how much we achieve or acquire,
Right.
it's never quite enough.
Never enough.
What's fascinating is that this Japanese Buddhist text called Pochi,
Wow.
which translates to non-reaction practice, tackles this head-on.
Interesting.
It's become a bestseller in Japan. And believe me, you don't need to be a Zen master to appreciate its insights.
Okay, color me intrigued.
Yeah.
So this book is diving into the age-old question of why we humans are so good at finding things to worry about.
Precisely.
Okay.
And it goes even deeper, suggesting that the root of our suffering isn't the problems themselves, but our reactions to them.
Our reactions.
I would have called these useless reactions.
Useless reactions.
Yeah, getting all riled up over things we can't control, like aging illness, or that person who insists on narrating their entire grocery list to the cashier.
Oh, man. I feel that one in my soul.
Right.
The grocery store saga.
Yeah.
But you're saying the book's solution is to just like not react.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit like telling someone to just stop being sad?
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Think of it like this. We can't stop the waves, but we can learn to surf.
Okay.
The book draws a fascinating parallel to Lao Tzu's concept of wu wei.
Wu wei.
Effortless action, which emphasizes working with the natural flow of things rather than resisting it.
So it's not about becoming some emotionless robot.
Right. Yeah.
It's about choosing our battles wisely.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book provides a framework for understanding why we have these useless reactions in the first place.
Interesting.
It all boils down to our desires.
Our desires.
Which Buddha neatly categorizes into 7 base drives.
7.
Survival, sleep, food, sex.
Okay, those seem pretty fundamental.
Right.
Hard to argue with those.
But then he adds some that might raise an eyebrow.
Okay, such as?
Laziness, pleasure.
Laziness.
Gradation.
Hold up. Laziness is a fundamental human desire.
That's what Buddha says.
Well, that explains a lot about my weekend plans.
Right.
But seriously, how do these desires lead to all this suffering?
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The book suggests that these desires are, by their very nature, insatiable.
Insatiable.
We achieve something, we experience a fleeting moment of pleasure, and then we're on to the next craving.
Always on to the next one.
The book calls this cycle samsara, an endless pursuit of satisfaction that never quite arrives.
It never ends. Okay, I'm starting to see where the useless reactions come in. We're constantly striving for something. And when reality inevitably falls short, we freak out.
Right.
But if the solution is to let go of desire, doesn't life become kind of like bland?
That's a good...
What's the point of anything if we're not striving for something?
That's a key question, and the book addresses it directly.
Okay, good.
It's not about erasing desire altogether, but rather about shifting our focus from those negative grasping desires to more positive, fulfilling ones.
So instead of craving that next promotion, we should be focusing on what exactly?
The book emphasizes cultivating qualities like compassion, empathy, and genuine joy for others' successes.
Genuine joy for others' successes.
These are desires that actually lead to a sense of inner peace and fulfillment.
Okay, so it's about rewiring our brains to want different things.
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is.
But let's say I managed to tame my inner craving monster. Does that mean I'm just supposed to accept everything that life throws at me?
Not necessarily.
Even the stuff that's genuinely frustrating.
Right.
Like if someone cuts me off in traffic, I should just like smile and wave.
That's where the satire comes in.
Right.
The book isn't advocating for passive acceptance of everything.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the difference between situations we can control and those we can't.
Yeah.
And for those things we can't control, it suggests a radical approach. Choosing to laugh at the absurdity of it all, rather than letting it steal our peace.
Okay, that's starting to make more sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about denying reality, but about choosing a different lens through which to view it.
Yeah.
Kind of like if life gives you lemons, make a meme about it.
Exactly.
Like that.
The book argues that humor can be a powerful tool for detaching from those useless reactions.
So we're talking about a sort of Zen and the Art of Trolling Life's Annoyances.
That's a good one.
Is that it?
Yeah.
But how exactly do we cultivate this enlightened sense of humor?
One of the key concepts the book introduces is recognizing the inherent absurdity in many of the things we take so seriously.
Okay.
For example, think about the whole concept of success. Society tells us we need to climb the ladder, achieve certain milestones, accumulate wealth and status.
And of course, social media is constantly shoving those perfect lives in our faces, making us feel like we're not measuring up.
Right. But what if we step back and look at it all from a more detached perspective?
Okay.
All this striving, all this competition, all this anxiety over things that ultimately don't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, isn't it?
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
When you put it that way, it does seem a bit ridiculous to get so worked up over things like getting the right car or having the most followers.
Yeah.
But how do we go from seeing the absurdity to actually finding it funny?
That's where the book's emphasis on self-awareness comes in.
Self-awareness, okay.
It encourages us to become more mindful of our own reactions.
Okay.
To pay attention to those moments when we're getting caught up in the drama of it all.
So it's about catching ourselves in those moments of useless reaction.
Yes.
And then you just start laughing.
It's not about forcing a fake laugh.
Okay.
But about cultivating a sense of detachment and perspective.
Detachment and perspective.
The book argues that when we can see the situation for what it is, often a fleeting, ultimately insignificant blip on the radar of our lives, it becomes easier to find the humor in it.
So it's like developing a cosmic sense of humor?
I like that.
But let's be real, not everyone is a natural comedian.
Right.
Does the book offer any advice for those of us who struggle to see the funny side of life's frustrations?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
One of the key suggestions is to start by simply noticing the absurdity.
Noticing the absurdity.
No judgment.
So instead of getting angry when that guy cuts me off in traffic, I just observe it and think, wow, that was a truly masterful display of inconsiderate driving. Bravo.
Exactly.
Okay.
The key is to approach it with a sense of detachment and curiosity.
Detachment and curiosity.
Rather than judgment and anger.
Okay.
The book suggests that by simply observing the absurdity, we create a space between the event and our reaction, which allows us to choose a more balanced and humorous response.
Okay. I can see how that could be helpful.
Yeah.
It's like taking a step back and saying, is this really worth getting all worked up about?
Right.
Or can I choose to find the humor in this situation?
Precisely.
Right.
And as we practice this, it becomes easier to see the humor in more and more situations.
So it's a skill we can develop.
Right.
Like learning to play an instrument or speak a new language.
Exactly. And just like any skill, it takes practice and patience.
Practice and patience.
But the book assures us that the rewards are well worth the effort.
So we're talking about a path to not just less stress, but actually more joy.
That's the idea.
That's a pretty compelling proposition.
It is.
But before we dive into the specific techniques for cultivating this cosmic sense of humor, there's one thing I'm still curious about. The book is called Non-Reaction Practice.
Right.
But it seems like it's advocating for a very specific kind of reaction. Finding the funny side of things.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit of a contradiction?
That's a great observation.
Okay.
And it actually points to a key nuance in the book's message.
Okay.
It's not about suppressing all reactions.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing which reactions are helpful
Right.
and which are simply adding to our suffering.
Okay.
And laughter, the book argues,
Yeah.
is often a far more effective response than anger, frustration, or despair.
So it's about choosing our reactions wisely.
Yes.
Opting for the ones that bring us joy.
Exactly.
Rather than feeding the flames of negativity.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
It feels empowering.
It is empowering.
Like we have more control over our experience than we might realize.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm definitely on board with that.
Good.
So let's dive into those specific techniques.
Okay.
How do we go from understanding the concept to actually putting it into practice?
Well, the book offers a fascinating array of tools and techniques for cultivating this sense of detached amusement.
Okay.
And one of the most intriguing is the concept of recognizing the 7 base desires.
Oh, right. The survival, sleep, food, sex.
Yeah.
Laziness, pleasure, and validation crew.
That's the one.
But how do those tie into finding humor in everyday life?
Here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
The book argues that by understanding these desires, we can start to see how they drive so many of our reactions. For example, let's say you're stuck in traffic, feeling that familiar surge of frustration.
Oh, believe me, I know that feeling well.
Right.
Yeah.
But what if instead of getting caught up in the anger, you take a moment to observe what's happening within you?
Observe what's happening within me.
Okay. You might notice that your desire for comfort sleep is being thwarted.
Okay.
Or your desire for pleasure, getting to your destination, is being delayed.
Okay, I could see that.
Yeah.
So by recognizing the underlying desire, we're sort of taking the power away from the immediate situation.
Exactly. It's like saying, okay, I see what you're doing here. Desire for comfort.
Okay.
I recognize your influence.
Okay.
But I'm not going to let you dictate my emotional state.
So it's about becoming the observer of our own desires.
Yeah.
Rather than being controlled by them.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that's where the humor comes in.
Okay.
When we can see our desires operating in this way, it often becomes easier to find the absurdity in the situation.
The absurdity.
It's like saying, wow, look at me getting all bent out of shape because my desire for a smooth commute isn't being met.
Right.
How ridiculous is that?
So it's about injecting a bit of self-awareness and irony into the equation.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about saying, I see the game you're playing, life.
Right.
And I'm choosing to laugh at it rather than get sucked into the drama.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
Good.
But let's get specific.
Okay.
Can you give me an example of how this desire awareness can lead to humor in a real-life situation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's say you're at the grocery store.
Okay.
And the person in front of you is taking forever to check out.
Oh, no.
They're meticulously examining every coupon, recounting their change.
Oh, gosh.
And engaging in a lengthy conversation with the cashier about the weather.
Oh, man. I could feel my blood pressure rising just thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the typical useless reaction kicking in.
Right.
Right. But what if instead of getting frustrated, you take a moment to observe your own desires?
Yeah, okay.
You might notice that your desire for efficiency is being thwarted.
Okay.
Or your desire to get home and relax is being delayed.
Okay, I can see that.
So how do we go from recognizing those desires to actually finding the humor in the situation?
That's the question.
That's where the creativity comes in.
Creativity, okay.
But maybe you imagine the person in front of you as a character in a sitcom.
Okay.
With exaggerating mannerisms and a hilarious backstory.
Okay, I like that.
Or maybe you start composing a satirical song in your head.
Oh.
About the epic checkout saga unfolding before you.
Okay, that's pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like turning the whole experience into a comedy routine in your own mind.
Exactly. And by doing that, you're effectively detaching from the frustration.
Okay.
And choosing a more joyful response.
So it's about finding the funny even in the mundane.
Precisely.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's like turning life's little annoyances into opportunities for amusement.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book argues that as we practice this, it becomes a habit, a way of approaching life with a lighter heart and a more playful spirit.
Okay. I'm definitely on board with that.
Good.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I have to ask, does this approach work for everything?
That's a great question.
I mean, what about those really tough situations, the ones that aren't so easy to laugh off?
That's a great question, and it leads us into one of the most profound insights of the book.
Which is?
The power of acceptance.
The power of acceptance.
But before we dive into that,
okay,
we need to take a closer look at the book's connection to a legendary Japanese sword.
Wait, a sword?
A sword.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
What does a sword have to do with Buddhist philosophy and finding humor in everyday life?
That's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah. Okay, I can't wait. Okay, so we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
You mentioned a legendary Japanese sword.
Right.
And I have to admit, my curiosity is piqued.
Okay.
How does a weapon fit into this whole idea of finding humor in life's frustrations?
It's not the weapon itself, but what it represents.
Okay.
Remember the author's name we mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
Kusanagi Ryujun?
Yeah, Kusanagi Ryujun.
That name's incredibly rare in Japan.
Really?
And it has a direct connection to one of the most famous swords in Japanese mythology.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Kusanagi no Tsurugi?
Kusanagi no Tsurugi.
Grass-cutting sword.
Wait, so the author's name is basically Mr. Grass-cutting sword.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's pretty epic.
It is.
But I'm still not seeing the connection to Buddhist philosophy or humor.
The Kusanagi sword is one of the 3 sacred treasures of Japan.
Really?
Symbolizing the emperor's authority.
Okay.
Legend has it that it was found inside the tail of a giant 8-headed serpent, slain by the storm god Susanoo.
Okay, now we're talking mythical serpents and divine swords.
Right.
This deep dive just took a turn into epic legend territory.
Yeah.
But how does any of this relate to letting go of useless reactions?
The sword's original name was Ame no Murakumo no Tsurugi.
Ame no Murakumo no Tsurugi.
Meaning sword of the gathering clouds of heaven.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, but it was later renamed Kusanagi, meaning grass cutter, referencing a story about a legendary prince named Yamato Takeru.
Yamato Takeru, okay.
Who wielded the sword.
Okay.
He was once trapped in a field set ablaze by his enemies.
Oh, yeah.
And he used the sword to cut down the grass and escape the flames.
I see.
Hence the name grass-cutting sword.
Ah, so it's a symbol of overcoming adversity and finding a way out of seemingly impossible situations.
Right.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's like a metaphorical reminder that even when we feel trapped by our anxieties, there's always a way to cut through the clutter.
Cut through the clutter. I like that.
And find a path to peace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the connection to the book's message becomes clear.
Right.
Just as the Kusanagi sword can cut through physical obstacles, the book suggests that we can cultivate a mental grass-cutting sword.
Okay, a mental...
To cut through our anxieties and negative reactions.
So the author's name is like a little Easter egg for the reader.
Yeah, you could say that.
A subtle hint that we all possess this inner strength.
That's the idea.
To overcome life's challenges.
That's right.
I love that.
Yeah.
But how exactly do we forge this metaphorical sword?
The book argues that one of the key ways to cultivate this grass-cutting ability is through recognizing the inherent absurdity in many of the things we take so seriously.
Right, okay.
It's about taking a step back and seeing the humor in our own struggles, much like a skilled satirist would.
So it's about developing a more satirical lens through which to view life.
Exactly.
Okay.
I can see how that could be helpful. When we can laugh at something, it often loses its power over us.
Right.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The book suggests that humor can be a powerful antidote to anxiety and frustration.
Anxiety and frustration.
It's about recognizing the absurdity of our own reactions.
Right.
The ways in which we get caught up in dramas that ultimately don't matter in the grand scheme of things.
So it's about laughing at ourselves, at our own tendency to overreact to life's little annoyances.
Exactly.
I can definitely see the appeal in that.
Yeah.
It's like taking ourselves a little less seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
And the book goes even further, suggesting that humor can help us detach from those useless reactions we discussed earlier.
Right, right.
When we can find the funny side of a situation, it becomes much easier to let go of the anger, frustration, or anxiety that might otherwise consume us.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all ties together.
Yeah.
We cultivate a grass-cutting sword of humor by recognizing the absurdity of our reactions.
Exactly.
Which allows us to detach from those reactions and ultimately find more peace and joy in the present moment.
That's it.
It's like a recipe for turning life's lemons into comedic lemonade.
Love that analogy.
Yeah.
And the book provides some specific techniques for how to actually cultivate this sense of humor.
Okay.
One of the most interesting is the idea of using our imagination to reframe situations.
To reframe situations. Okay.
Remember that grocery store scenario we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah. That one definitely got my blood pressure up.
Right. But what if, instead of getting frustrated, you use your imagination to turn the situation into something more amusing?
More amusing. Okay.
Maybe you picture the person as a character in a slapstick comedy.
Okay.
Or you start composing a satirical song in your head about the epic checkout saga unfolding before you.
Okay, I can see how that could work.
Right.
It's like turning the whole experience into a mental comedy routine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what about those situations that are genuinely difficult?
Right.
The ones that aren't so easy to laugh off?
Yeah. Does the book have any advice for those times?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The book argues that even in the face of real challenges, we can still choose to approach them with a sense of humor and perspective.
But how do we do that when we're feeling overwhelmed by stress or sadness? It seems almost disrespectful to laugh at something that's causing us genuine pain.
It's not about making light of suffering.
Okay.
But about recognizing that even in the darkest of times,
Yeah.
there can be moments of absurdity, of irony, of unexpected humor.
So it's about finding those little glimmers of light, even in the midst of darkness.
Exactly. The book suggests that even when life feels like a tragedy, there's often a comedic undercurrent running through it.
Okay.
And by tapping into that comedic energy, we can find a sense of resilience.
Resilience.
A way to navigate those challenges without being completely consumed by them.
So it's like finding a way to laugh through the tears.
You could say that.
But doesn't that feel a bit forced?
Well,
like we're trying to put on a happy face when we're actually feeling terrible.
It's not about denying or suppressing our emotions.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that even in the midst of pain, there can be moments of grace, of beauty, of humor.
So it's about allowing ourselves to experience the full spectrum of human emotions.
Exactly.
Without getting stuck in the negativity.
That's the idea.
Okay.
The book emphasizes that true joy isn't about avoiding pain or pretending that everything is perfect.
Right.
It's about finding a way to embrace the messy, chaotic, often absurd reality of life and to find moments of lightness and laughter even in the most unexpected places.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this whole satirical Buddhism thing works.
Good.
It's not about denying reality, but about choosing a different lens through which to view it.
Exactly.
And by cultivating this lens of humor, we can cut through our anxieties, detach from our useless reactions, and ultimately find more peace and joy in the present moment.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And the book goes even further, suggesting that this ability to find humor in the face of adversity is actually a sign of spiritual maturity.
Spiritual maturity.
It's about recognizing that life is inherently impermanent.
Impermanent.
That everything is in a constant state of flux.
So it's about accepting the impermanence of things, the good and the bad, and finding a way to laugh on the whole cosmic dance.
Precisely. And the book argues that this acceptance of impermanence is actually the key to true liberation.
Liberation, okay.
When we can let go of our attachment to things being a certain way. When we can embrace the ever-changing nature of reality, we free ourselves from the suffering that comes from clinging to the illusion of permanence.
So it's about recognizing that everything changes, that nothing stays the same forever, and finding a way to find humor in that constant flux.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book suggests that by cultivating the sense of humor, this ability to laugh at the absurdity of it all, we can move through life with a lighter heart, a more playful spirit, and a deeper sense of peace.
Okay, I'm definitely on board with that.
Good.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one thing I'm still curious about.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about finding humor in external situations.
Right.
But what about the internal stuff?
Internal stuff,
What about those negative thoughts and self-doubts that can plague us from within? Does the book offer any advice for dealing with those?
That's a great question. And it leads us into one of the most powerful techniques the book offers. The art of self-deprecation.
Self-deprecation.
But before we dive into that, let's take a closer look at the concept of samsara. The endless cycle of suffering we mentioned earlier.
Right, the hamster wheel of desire.
Exactly.
But how does self-deprecation help us break free from that cycle?
That's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we're back to this idea of samsara. This endless cycle of wanting and striving that never quite leads to lasting satisfaction.
It's a tough one.
And you're saying self-deprecation is the key to breaking free.
Well, it's a tool.
That seems a little counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that.
Isn't self-love supposed to be the path to happiness?
It's not about putting ourselves down or wallowing in self-pity. It's about approaching our own flaws and shortcomings with a sense of humor and perspective.
So it's like turning that critical inner voice into a stand-up comedian.
Okay.
The book argues that when we can laugh at our own imperfections, they lose their power to control us.
They lose their power.
Okay. It's like saying, hey, inner critic, I see you trying to bring me down with those self-doubts. Nice try, but I'm not buying it.
So it's about disarming our inner critic with a well-placed punchline.
That's the idea.
I like that.
Yeah.
But doesn't that require a certain level of, self-confidence?
That's a good point.
It seems like the people who are most prone to self-criticism might also be the least likely to laugh at themselves.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it highlights a key insight from the book. Self-deprecation isn't about masking insecurity.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we're all flawed, imperfect beings.
Yeah.
And that's okay. In fact, it's what makes us human.
Yeah.
The book suggests that by embracing our imperfections, we actually create more space for self-acceptance and compassion.
So it's about acknowledging our shortcomings.
Without letting them define us?
Exactly.
It's like saying, yes, I have flaws, but I'm also pretty awesome in other ways.
Right.
And besides, who wants to be perfect anyway? That sounds boring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book argues that perfection is an illusion.
Okay.
An unattainable goal that only leads to frustration and disappointment is by embracing our imperfections, by laughing at our own quirks and foibles, that we actually become more authentic and relatable.
So it's about turning our flaws into comedic fodder.
You could say that.
I could see how that could be liberating.
It is.
It's like saying, take that society's unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Choosing to embrace my weirdness and have a laugh along the way.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the book suggests that this attitude of self-acceptance and self-deprecation is actually the foundation for genuine happiness.
Okay.
When we can let go of the need to be perfect.
Yeah.
When we can laugh at our own stumbles and setbacks.
Right.
We free ourselves from the tyranny of self-judgment.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually cultivate this sense of self-deprecation? Does the book offer any practical tips?
One of the most effective techniques the book suggests is to practice what it calls mindful self-mockery.
Mindful self-mockery.
This involves paying attention to those moments when we're being overly self-critical and then gently poking fun at our own thought patterns.
So like if I'm feeling insecure about a presentation I have to give,
Yeah.
I could say to myself, oh, great, here I go again, about to bore everyone to tears with my dazzling display of awkwardness.
Exactly.
Okay.
The key is to do it with a sense of lightness and playfulness rather than harsh self-criticism.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the absurdity of our own thought patterns and choosing to laugh at them rather than letting them dictate our emotional state.
So it's like turning our inner critic into a comedic sidekick.
Yeah, I like that.
Someone who points out our flaws in a humorous way rather than a judgmental one.
Exactly. Yeah. And as we practice this, we start to develop a more compassionate and accepting relationship with ourselves.
Right.
We realize that we're all just doing the best we can.
Yeah.
And that our imperfections are actually part of what makes us unique and interesting.
Okay. I'm really starting to see the power in this approach.
Yeah.
It's about turning that negative self-talk into a source of amusement rather than a source of pain.
Exactly.
It's like saying, hey, inner critic, I know you're just trying to protect me.
Yeah.
But you're not very good at comedy.
Right.
Let's lighten up a bit, shall we?
Exactly.
And the book argues that as we cultivate this sense of self-deprecation, we actually become more resilient and adaptable.
More resilient and adaptable, that's right.
We're less likely to be thrown off balance by challenges and setbacks because we've learned to laugh at ourselves and keep things in perspective.
Exactly.
So it's like developing a comedic shield that deflects those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
A comedic shield?
Yes.
I like that.
And self-doubts. I like that.
Yeah.
It's like saying, life, you can throw your worst at me, but I'm armed with laughter and self-acceptance, so bring it on.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And the book suggests that this attitude of resilience and self-acceptance is actually the key to living a truly fulfilling and meaningful life.
Fulfilling and meaningful life, okay?
When we can let go of the need to be perfect.
Right.
When we can embrace our imperfections and find the humor in our own struggles, we free ourselves to live with more joy, authenticity, and purpose.
So we've come full circle.
Full circle, yeah.
We started by talking about useless reactions and the endless cycle of suffering. And now we're talking about self-acceptance and the power of laughter.
It's all connected.
It seems that this book offers a surprisingly profound and practical approach.
I agree.
To navigating the complexities of human experience.
I couldn't agree more.
It's a reminder that even ancient wisdom can have surprisingly relevant and applicable insights for modern life.
And who knew that a legendary Japanese sword
could hold
the key to finding humor in everyday life.
It's quite a story.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It has been.
And I think our listeners will appreciate the book's unique blend of Buddhist philosophy, satire, and practical wisdom.
I'm confident they will.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe they'll even be inspired to forge their own grass-cutting swords of humor to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there, remember, life is a journey, not a destination.
Well said.
And sometimes the best way to get through it is to laugh at the absurdity of it all, including ourselves.
Wise words.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder the profound and often hilarious insights of non-reaction practice.
Until next time.
Until next time, may you find joy in the journey, laughter in the unexpected, and a little bit of zen in the midst of the chaos.
I like that.